want to avoid the feedback. Can we all mute our laptops? Thank you. Hello, Gert.
Hello, yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. We are ready this side. If you can share your screen and begin.
And I can hear myself a bit in echo, but I think that is okay. Can you see my screen? I will just put that in larger. So will I start going? Or is there some introduction from somebody else?
Just a moment, Gert.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, David can do that in brief.
Is in the room, maybe without it, but the model. I hope that's okay.
Okay, thank you very much. So can everybody see my screen, and can you hear me clearly in the room and those online as well?
We can hear you clearly. Your screen is beaming very well.
To the session, and thank you. It was not possible, but I really hope that I know I can't see my own presentation right now, so I can't see the room, but I do know. So let me just introduce myself. So even in some cases, some partners, the person or the people who are represented might have changed. But my name is, but I am from Christian Aid. So some of you I met in the Zimbabwe country from. So in this case, it was an update. And interestingly enough, Christian Aid's, in the past, we've always had our approach and model, but we've never actually called it a policy that's also publicly available. So this presentation, I imagine will be, or I hope it will be shared as well. So you can see the public link on this first page. So I'll talk you through the policy a little bit, but just in headlines. And then I will mention a few things of what that means for ways of working, and actually even touch on a few operational things, because this is the strategic document, but it is, of course, linked with how the operations side of things work. So the policy is, the core document is about 7 pages, and then it's got an appendix. So if anybody wants to have a full view of it, the core part, in a way, is a 1-page. These sections that are on this slide are a page or 2. So an introduction, why partnership, a revalidation of why we work in partnership, and then the partnership principles, which is a single page, with some details on our principles that Christian Aid commits to and strives towards. And then a bit of reality check, partnerships in a changing global context, and then the benefit, the 2-way benefit, or the multi-way benefit, I should say. And then there's an appendix of different kinds of partnerships, because Christian Aid works in different arenas and in different spheres, and some of them overlap. I'll actually show you a slide later on that. So just firstly, the scope of the partnership policy, and the real centerpiece of it is core partnership principles. So we root our partnership in these principles, and this has never been articulated so clearly as in this new partnership approach. So partnership is not an organizational setup for implementing or subcontracting. There can be implementing subcontracting occasions as well, but we want to go beyond that. We really want to work jointly and mutually with partners. And then that this policy applies across Christian Aid. So it's about varied organizational relationship, and it includes funded and non-funded relationships. And it is for the country programs, which in Christian Aid speak for, because I know there's a mix of some partners who've been with Christian Aid for many years. And I think there are also, well, I understand there are also a few partners that have only recently joined in the last year or two, maybe. But Christian Aid also has global advocacy partners, and then also relations, especially with communities and church-related connections in the UK and Ireland. And this policy is intentional, that it's not just for projects, not just for implementation, but also covers those. So the partnership principles are framed that they work in those different contexts, but very much the majority of our partners are like many of you in the rooms, or some of you online, I think, or I understand, and across varied countries, many in Africa, in fact, where Christian Aid works. The policy is a strategic document, so it frames and guides our partnerships rather than a description of operational processes. That is also needed, and I have 2 or 3 slides on that part as well. But it is then complemented by program quality standards, partner cycle management processes, policies, and tools. But this is the strategic direction. Oops, that was the wrong way slide. Do just let me know if there's a sound problem at any point. But after going through my presentation, I do hope we have some conversation as well on how things resonate, any questions, challenges, opportunities. So I would be very keen that we also have a bit of a conversation on this. The partnership principles are, as I said, at the core of it. So I'll take a bit longer on this one. And I also just wanted to mention that this process, it very much arises of what has been there in the past. There was a process this year, so over many months of speaking with several teams, several countries, and involving quite a few partners, not across the board. It wasn't any big survey. It was really just some conversations in multiple parts, but in some cases the conversations actually happened in spaces like this one. And we had, in fact, at the time agreed that with Zimbabwe we would get back to this later in the year, but there was a lot of feedback around these principles and have been validated in multiple forums already. So a real headline is that partnership is mutual, that based on shared values, goals, and the word trust actually arose during these conversations. It was partners in different countries that said it really is the mutual trust that is important as well. And you will see this, these are two-way. All of these partnership principles, although it is what Christian Aid strives towards, and I say we're not always there yet with those, so it is aspirational, and it is what we try to commit to generally, but it is meant to be understood from both ways. So leads to collective action. That means it's not only a bilateral, and this is linked with the project implementation logic. It isn't just Christian Aid giving money, somebody implementing, and that feeds into a project that is probably has a back donor funding somewhere. No, it's collective action where firstly multiple partners can connect, and multiple partners might be doing different bits, and one of those multiple partners could very well be Christian Aid. And for example, also around advocacy, there could be an element where Christian Aid connects with global audiences as well. It could be connecting with other countries. It could be connecting within the country of Christian Aid being part of that collective action, and always as is appropriate in each context. Then partnership is transformational, and yes, of course, the center of why we are doing this is transformation for people living in poverty and people being marginalized, communities. But we also hope that it is transformational in a positive way for both Christian Aid and the partner. And I'll get back to the added value. And then partnership is dynamic, which means there can be moments of change. We do generally have longer term commitments, and that is the intention of this principle. But there are also moments when partnerships change in the way they operate, and there might also be times to move on when maybe priorities have diverged. Sometimes there might be a moment where one has to exit from a funded relationship simply because there is no funding. And as you would all know, the the fine that is often the elephant in the room, and it can often be a situation that programs end, projects end. But if there is a longer term relationship, it could very well be, and I actually know that there are cases also in the Zimbabwe partners where there has been no funding for some years, and then a funded relationship restarts, and the connection remained. So it wasn't the end, yet there are other moments where there might be a decision to go separate routes, and maybe partners say, we don't actually need Christian Aid either. We are strong on our own. And that links to the next one. That partnership is to enhance social capital and capacity and enables learning, but for all involved. So it does include, and they are very often partners that say, well, we have organizational capacity issues and challenges, and we really would like Christian Aid to support us with that, to help us with that, also in the context of the project or as Christian Aid itself. But Christian Aid also values the knowledge and the learning from partners, and Christian Aid recognizes that Christian Aids get strengthened, and the advocacy for that matter at global level, for example, is only possible because there are these strong connections with community-linked organizations around the world as well. And that is where the partnerships build on the legitimacy of all parties involved. That is very much the legitimacy and accountability to the communities, to the people living in poverty and that are marginalized, that are excluded. And the same goes with the last one. The partnership respects and expands the space and voice of others. Initially, we did focus on the respects because this is about respecting the space of communities and very definitely of other partners. But then it was voiced that Christian Aid also has a funding taking sometimes some of these voices to other spaces, and so the expand is in that same one as well. But it should be on as appropriate and as the partners and as the communities expect of Christian Aid, rather than going their own stream and deciding what to do. So all of these, the word mutual at the top is actually the center of all of this. So this is the slide I wanted to take my longest on. I will run through a few more now, and then happy for a bit of conversation. In the policy, this is actually before the principles, but I want to get to the principles soon. But to just say, Christian Aid really believes in transformational change for those living in poverty and marginalization, and to support the agency and power of people. It's intentionally not to build or enable the agency and power, because the agency and power of people and communities and of you as partners, you build that, the communities build that. But this is the end. It is also to be transformational change for Christian Aid and our partners. So we recognize in that sense that partnership is even an aim in itself as well. And a means to an end. We do ground our approach in the global strategy, standing together, and I imagine you've spoken a bit about that already or will do, but I just want to highlight that we have the 3 Ps framework of poverty, power, and prophetic voice, and that does guide our partnership, that these are not 3 loose-standing strands, but are connected. And that also in our partnerships, we expect, and this is part of the shared values, shared trust, shared goals, that we imagine or understand that many of our partners, even if you don't articulate it in these 3 words, would have a similar understanding of them, that we really work with people living in poverty, and including extreme poverty, which is actually part of Christian Aid's definition of it, but that poverty is not only about money. Poverty is also about access to opportunities, about dignity. And power has been a word that Christian Aid has always connected quite strongly, and I know some of the partners, and I am familiar with quite a bit of the work of some of the Zimbabwe partners, that there's very much this power awareness about challenging power. And the prophetic voice of also, it is not only about speaking out, or maybe in local context, that can be more about power, but prophetic voice about also envisaging a better world and a better Zimbabwe, or a better community, a better area where we live in, and voicing that, but that the communities are at the center of voicing that. Then the real complementary roles that local and international
Can proceed. I can.
Hello, yes. Are we on again?
Yes, we are on. Please proceed. Thank you.
Okay, great. Yes, and then just a recognition of flexibility, and in a changing world. I mean, we recognize the localization or the local ownership. That is one of the aspects we've been working on, especially also in the humanitarian world, or in the humanitarian part of the programming. But in effect, what is the localization model is very much what Christian Aid has been doing for many years, or has been believing in. Hopefully also effectively doing. And many of the commitments, some of you might have heard of these, the Charter for Change, Grand Bargain, Core Humanitarian Standards, all are commitments to localize, and the way we deal with localization, but partnership is at the center of that. So all of this is in harmony with that. And Christian Aid wants to go further. It really wants to have power in the center of that, and recognition of power. And we're also on a journey of trying to explore what does further decolonization of our practice mean. And we would definitely want our partnership practice to be part of that. And that, of course, is at multiple levels and has many aspects. So we hope that some of you will be walking that journey with us along that, because as has been said, decolonization is an unfinished business. Even if it happened at political level, there's still a lot of it in minds and wants to continue walking. In this, just around more on flexibility, the different forms of partnership, we do recognize there will be short-term partnerships. Sometimes they are very project-specific partnerships, and then there's no ambition that all these partnership principles must necessarily be there. Yet Christian Aid strives towards them in all our engagements, but we do recognize that the long-term, if there's no interest longer term, some are really more like consultancies. But with the people in this room, I think that you are in this room because we are on a joint journey. And that might change. There might be moments of of disconnecting in future, but you have been in a journey with Christian Aid. And there's the hope that there's always this open conversation. There's another aspect is there can be direct action or direct implementation by Christian Aid, so it doesn't contradict this. So, for example, there have been cases when in the cyclone Idai where Christian Aid has jumped in directly as well. But this is always done without taking from our commitment to our core principles of transformative mutual partnerships. And I know in that case, for example, that there was an initial moment of Christian Aid in that, and then some of it handed over to partners or continuation with partners. I think you know much of this, of what partners bring to Christian Aid, but I do want to just mention it and emphasize the deep knowledge of local context, specialist expertise, and relationship with power holders that Christian Aid cannot always have. And yes, we have a Christian Aid Zimbabwe and all of you, my colleagues in the room, have a deep and long understanding as well, and very definitely of the local context, and that is recognized on both those levels. But we can't be specialists in everything, and that is why partners with specialist expertise, and not only of the academic kind, but really of an understanding of how things work in the reality in communities as well. And this also helps root Christian Aid in the vision for change, and in practical context and lived realities, and for that matter, in any that the global advocacy needs to be based on. So the local and national partners, of course, the closeness to communities, and this was very obvious during the COVID-19 pandemic. The fact that some of you are faith actors with access to large faith communities and influential faith leaders, and this helps connect communities also with the global north, also in the faith context, but we also have other connections globally, and that there are some partners that are real experts in a specific field, like private sector knowledge or academic research, and all of that is important. The added value, this was a list that was initially created from in-depth study some years ago, but adapted a little bit, especially emphasizing this first one, the connecting of people. So all of these actually arose from what different partners in different countries were telling Christian Aid. But the connecting of people, communities, and partners at different levels, we really want to emphasize that as one that several people have raised and have reaffirmed again in this year, but also that Christian Aid wants to strive to be even better at. The strengthening of civil society and being the voice where this can be in direct capacity support, operational strengthening, but it can also be about engaging at a civil society space, but respecting as in the principles. Then the brokering of multi-stakeholder spaces. This can include people that we would never call our partners. So this goes beyond partners. So for example, in some of the market system, and I know that is something that also happened in Zimbabwe. I know with my colleague Thierry, we've had conversations on this in the past quite a bit. Also around that you would have market actors that wouldn't be our partners, but we recognize the importance and value of speaking with them. Same with some government actors that you might have in some spaces that we wouldn't refer to as partners, but we recognize the importance of engaging. And yes, that can be at local level, for example, and at multiple levels. The leveraging of resources, enhancing advocacy, and supporting advocacy practice, the protecting of partners. This is especially something that in conflict context has been mentioned. And then just reiterating this sharing knowledge, good practice, expertise, and innovation. And this is one little diagram of global partnerships, which can be advocacy or academic partnership. In order to make this visually, the overlap is quite small, but in effect, the partnership policy. And then I just want to show you, I don't know, or was it 3? I'm not sure. I think 2. this is a cycle that we look at, and it isn't as circular and as linear with just a single line. In fact, there's a place that suddenly divides in multiple lines. But if we start at the top, assessment, and that is not goals that we actually want to work together, and it is meant to be a two-way conversation. And I think, and I hope, but I also think that some of you have some of these conversations with some of our colleagues, so some of the partners. Then it would move to the more, the risk management side, the partner risk assessment. And there's something which some of you would have known or seen, the POCRA, that's the Partner Operational Capacity Risk Assessment. This is a tool which increasingly the sector has been forced in a way down this route of that we need to be more, there's a lot of funding that comes from back donors, from other sources, and that force some of that on us. Value to happens might not reach the communities in the way that it should be, or that we aren't able to evidence back to maybe where the funding came from. So all of these risks, and this perception, oh, we need a safeguarding policy to protect our organization. And I say, no, we need a safeguarding policy to protect people in communities, to protect vulnerable people. That is why it is about people. And all of that is captured in this POCRA. Yes, it might come across sometimes as a top-down kind of tool, but I really would urge you to engage in it in a positive spirit. So this one is not about the partnership, it is about the partners. And this we would only do when they are funded relationship. So there could be even, I mean, there's cases where with private sector where they might not be receiving a funding from Christian Aid, but where we do actually believe we want to work in partnership. Then the partnership agreement should actually arise out of those two tools, or if you look further away to the left, the partnership review, which is looking at it again. And the partnership review, in a way, there's a light version that every year one should actually have a bit of a chat about how's our partnership going? Are we still friends? Are we still in agreement of what we want to do? But a larger one should happen every 3 to 5 years. And that is what should lead to a partnership agreement, not something to just get funds out. Because, and I'll show you in a moment, that we have two parts of our partnership agreement. And then at the bottom, just the ongoing, and this is project related, project monitoring, financial monitoring. And then there is this larger partnership review conversation that would then either lead to a new partner risk assessment, or it could even lead directly to the partnership agreement if it hasn't been that long ago, or it could be part of a partner portfolio review where also changing objectives, that can sometimes also be a reason why if there's a certain area of work that is maybe no longer and often for funding purposes that can no longer continue a strand of work, where it just simply means that it makes sense to go one separate way, and that is where the exiting partnership happens. And that can happen at two levels. It can be about exiting a funded partnership, or actually saying, well, we no longer have any shared objectives, we might have to go our separate ways. So that was a quick tour of what is not in the partnership policy. This is at the top right there, it says the quality standard that Christian Aid works in effective and complementary partnership with other actors to promote local agency and deliver sustainable change. And now I'm trying to move to my last slide, and it is not reacting. Why is my computer now not reacting? There we go. Yes, that was my last slide. And I think some of our longer term partners would know this, but for our newer partners, or as a reminder, and in fact for some of our newer colleagues, the partnership agreement for Christian Aid has two sections. And that is not a quirkiness, it's very intentional. Because what happens is that some partners, some INGOs, some international organizations, really just have what you would find in the second bullet there, a funding and reporting document, which is all about this is the risk. So the kind of things that I mentioned, the POCRA, that is in there. So it is really about asking, do you have the right systems, and committing around the systems, the committing where the budget is included, where money is talked about. But before we get to that stage, we do have this partnership section. So if some of you have seen these two parts and wondered why is that, it is exactly because we want to emphasize this mutuality. And this partnership policy isn't new in that. It is how Christian Aid has viewed this, but we recognize that we've drifted away from it a bit, and we want to recover that logic, that it is an umbrella agreement in principle for multi-years. It does not talk about money. It does not talk about a funding, a report that has to happen. It is the umbrella agreement. There could be that some of you might be in more than one project, and then you would have only one partnership section. It is how do we add value to each other? How does Christian Aid support your organizational plan as a partner? How does your organization contribute to Christian Aid Zimbabwe and Christian Aid globally in our aims? How can we strengthen each other? Those are the questions that one explores in a partnership review, a partnership assessment, and then that get documented in this partnership agreement. Whereas the funding and reporting section, that has a standard wording, so it's not revised. Whereas the partnership agreement, the partnership section, has boxes where we can fill in the specific situation. And it details each project, and it's updated at least annually, but it's really linked to the budget cycle. And each time new funding is out, you will see you have to re-sign as partners the second section. And that is to always have the most up-to-date version, whereas the partnership agreement, the partnership section, the umbrella part remains. I just thought I wanted to emphasize this element of the distinction, and that Christian Aid intentionally does this, makes this distinction. And the funding and reporting section has actually just been updated over the last month, and any new one that you will receive, if there's a lot of funding starting from now, and there are new clauses, and there is information. So there's a information sheet that is being circulated. So you can just ask whoever your Christian Aid partner contact is, partner lead for that or about that. And because there are some international, some aspects of safeguarding, some aspects of, for example, the data privacy. There are new international laws and regulations around that has to be stronger worded. Yet, what has happened with the FNR over the last few years, and we really made a point of saying we need to pull this back to mutuality as well. Many of the clauses say the partner will do so and so, and we add Christian Aid and the partner will do so and so. So yes, Christian Aid also commits to we will have an up-to-date safeguarding policy. Yes, we will have secure data management to ensure that community members, in cases where the data is actually sitting with Christian Aid as well, that the privacy is recognized, etc. And then the last point down there, that project monitoring, that really reviews the advances linked to that funding and reporting section, and it's project specific, proposals, reports, budgets, that's all there. That is what monitoring is about. Whereas the review, we do jointly. And it reviews our overall partnership outcomes, which might include more than one project, and our ongoing journey. And we hope that there's the trust. Christian Aid really wants to be in a trusted relationship where we can sometimes challenge and challenged. And as part of that conversation, I understand, on the program, I won't be part of that. And I think that is also quite correct. That is an internal Christian Aid Zimbabwe conversation. And yes, that is the structure. So Christian Aid Zimbabwe and Christian Aid Zimbabwe are partners. But at this point, I want to pause and just ask if there are any direct questions. I will actually probably switch off my sharing of the screen. And if anybody has questions or how it resonates, any challenges or opportunities you might see in that. Let me just see. I think there are a few people online as well, but I'll hand over to the chair on how you want to want to take this next bit forward, and how much time we still have.
Thanks, Gerd. We still have about. See the feedback.
I was hearing an echo, and now I don't hear anything, and I do see a hand up in the room, in the virtual room.
Yeah, let me
David,
just check. I've got in the room. I don't have any question, but I will then just ask the online questioner to come forward and present your question.
Okay, thank you very much, Gerhard, for this brilliant presentation. I'm very grateful that you have addressed quite a lot of key issues that are very important to us. Organizations alone cannot effectively change or create change needed in our communities. This is why, for example, our organization works with allies and partners by building movements of people who are fighting inequality to end poverty and injustice at local and regional level by delivering people-centered frameworks for transformational change that lasts. So currently, there has never been a stronger sense of urgency for action. And I feel that the partnership agreement is extremely important, so that we are looking at perhaps partnership principles, because in the past we have a partnership agreement with Christian Aid, and we've been working with Christian Aid for some years now, and we are very, very grateful for this incredible partnership, because it did not only include funding, but also non-funding, capacity building, and also creating shared visions and values. But sometimes when I look at the partnership agreement that we have currently with Christian Aid, I'm missing some links there in terms of complementarity of purpose and value added, for example. Then the other issue, and you brought this up again in your presentation as well, where you said that Christian Aid will monitor organizations, for example, in both funding and non-funding relationships. However, I also feel that we need to put an emphasis on autonomy and independence. Mutually working with partners and looking at partnership principles, there should always be transparency and mutual accountability, especially looking at the clarity on roles and responsibilities. And then also a commitment for joint learning. And I must commend Dr. Ntombi, who has recently visited us together with David here in Victoria Falls. I have seen such an amazing improvement in terms of the commitment to joint learning that came across to me and that I have seen, and was also able to, and we as an organization were also able to make contributions towards how can we develop a set of core partnership principles, for example, and strive to ensure that these principles underpin all our work with our local communities, with other civil society organizations, with government departments and with other actors as well. So I think I'm now closing here though, but I would also want to find out how can we help to bring together different actors to work on common problems so that we strengthen that element within the partnership agreement. And then also promoting innovation and alternative solutions that should be community-led and also hold community duty bearers accountable in recognizing, protecting, and fulfilling the rights of women, for example, living in poverty and injustice. Thank you.
Shall I come in on that?
Yes,
Yeah,
please.
please go ahead.
Well, thank you very much. There was quite a lot said in that, and a lot of course, was sharing your experience. So thank you very much for that. That's very, yeah, interesting and useful for me to hear as well. And I imagine you, yeah, that there are other spaces and moments for some of the conversations. Can I just clarify one point? The monitoring in funded and non-funded. Not monitoring, but being open for conversation. In a non-funded relationship, Christian Aid is not intending to monitor, and monitor in the sense of, because monitor is a tricky word. Monitor is the kind of word of that implies that one is sort of looking where things are going, but even monitor is intended in a positive, in a mutual sense. And part of monitoring really can and should be a joint reflection as well. But I wouldn't use the word monitor in non-funded. There it is a review and a mutual conversation. Whereas in funded relationship, there is an element of that one needs to jointly monitor, and Christian Aid does have we are charged by back donors sometimes or very often, and for that, those back donors include the individual donors that give to Christian Aid for the core funding, that ask us what is happening with the money, and that obviously has to be recorded, and I think a lot of that is just ongoing and normal practice. So we do also want to see monitoring as a joint journey to also show our results and show what we are achieving, because after all, that is what one, and we all know that money is that. So I think if one really sees the monitoring as also getting to that point, but the monitoring also to be able to talk to communities back as well. I would hope that monitoring visits exactly lead to that as well, that one is able to concisely present back to someone in a community asking, so what's happening with this project? Where are we going with this? So to always have that in mind as well. Then I think it's an important one that you mentioned at the beginning, the missing links on complementarity or added value. And that, so the idea of having a review conversation, that can be very much initiated from either end. That is the whole point of it being a mutual conversation. So if a partner feels that we are drifting apart a little bit, why don't you suggest, let's have a proper conversation about our relationship. And it has been suggested, and there is guidance in Christian Aid documents. There's even some, at the moment, quite a lengthy sort of template, but it's an optional one. And it could be that none of you, or that you haven't seen it, because the guidance is more about how to structure a meeting around a mutual review, but it is intentionally not a prescriptive one because it is meant to be mutual. It could easily be that the partner leads the review, yet it is useful to look at the partnership agreement and see what is in there. And if there are missing links in the complementarity or the added value, those are questions that are in the partnership agreement. And yeah, may I just mention that we are also looking at the partnership agreement now, because this new partnership policy, it went live last month. So it's a brand new document. So it's hot off the press. And it is now live on the Christian Aid website. So you can see it there. There's not only the main document of 7-8 pages and then 5 or 6 pages of annexes for different contexts, but there's also a 1.5 page summary. Well, it's a 1 page because you scroll down on the website. So in that link in the presentation, you can see on ongoing annual way. Then it isn't even a hard task, but that it should be element is important to you, yeah, that is where. So it's not only committing to, we do realize that project or whether there's a longer term intended journey. So although the partnership agreement will refer to the principles in all such cases, it is especially in the longer term joint partnership that we really want